For all the recent attention to equality on the job, it remains a fact that in this country, women's earnings on average are still only 60% of men's. It's because so many of the better-paying jobs are still closed to women, generally by tradition or prejudice, but sometimes even by law. That's how it was in Ontario in mining until 1980, and still is in Britain. Illegal for women to work underground. On this continent, the laws are changing, and a number of women who have little time for fancy talk about liberation are in fact acting as the shock troops for a whole movement. Their work is difficult, dirty, and dangerous, but most of them had no idea of proving a point when they got into it. For most of them, in their mining communities, it seemed quite simply the best job in town. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the shift is changing. This iron ore mine in the heart of the Canadian Shield goes round the clock. It's been a hard 8 hours, and these men have earned their pay. Wawa, Ontario, high up on Lake Superior, is a town built around the Algoma mine. In one way or another, every business and every family depends on it.
It used to be in mining towns that there were men's jobs and women's jobs. When the men got off the shift here at Algoma, some of them went downtown and had a few cool beers, served up, of course, by a woman. But then one day 7 years ago, Mildred Christiansen decided that she'd served her last beer, taken her last tip. She quit her job there and came out here to the mine looking for work.
Now Christiansen's an old hand and admits that everyone's a little twitchy the first time in the cage.
How far down are we going?
It's a 2-minute ride, half a mile down the shaft.
Is it more than one shaft going back up again?
We do have a tunnel that goes up to surface.
That makes me feel better. So everybody's gotten used to having a woman in the mine?
It's nice. Nice change.
She's like just one of the boys now.
Where'd you get working with her? She makes you work right collar to collar.
Really?
Yeah. But she don't shower with us, no.
It's huge, 75 kilometers of black tunnels. And out in the darkness, the only lights are from the half-ton trucks that carry the miners out to the drills at the rock face. This is the only deep shaft iron ore mine in North America. The others are all open pit. But this ore, bound for the big smelter in Sault Ste. Marie, is rich enough to still make it pay. And it pays off for the miners, too. $14 an hour. With bonuses, $30,000 a year. Good money in Wawa. And that's why Mildred Christiansen came out to the mine. But it took a fight at the Ontario Human Rights Commission just to get women through the gate for the high-paying manual jobs. And then in 1980, the Ontario law changed so Christiansen could head underground. She worked her way up to long-hole blaster. She packs explosives into holes some 100 feet deep. It's a tricky business. They have to go off only at the right time and make lots of rubble.
Why do you like it down here so much? I know if I had my druthers, I'd stay up on top.
Well, I worked on surface for 2 years, and it was getting to a point it was mostly shoveling and work like that. So I was more or less tired of it. So I said, well, I'll come down and try this.
The first woman into the mine is the last person out. Christiansen stays behind, and when the coast is clear, sets off the blast.
There it goes.
I hear it. I thought it'd be a lot louder than that, but if it's a mile away, I suppose it'll be plenty loud down there anyway.
All clear.
A change from her old job and also weekends off. But at the end of the day, it's a little lonely in the locker room. Christiansen's not just the only woman down below at Algoma. She's the only woman in Canada who does a miner's job underground. Christiansen didn't come here to be a pioneer. She grew up in Wawa. Her father works for Natural Resources, and her mother's pretty traditional.
Well, actually, my mom wanted me to be a nurse.
Do you ever wish you'd taken her advice?
No, I went candy striping for 2 years at the hospital here.
Volunteer nursing.
Yes, and it sort of cured me of ever wanting to be a nurse. I would sooner be a blaster.
And you have no qualms about not slinging beer anymore.
Oh, no. I make more than 3 times my wage now.
What was it like at the beginning? You know, you hear a lot about superstitious miners, that if women go underground, there's going to be accidents.
Well, I think they've sort of got over that now. You don't hear too much of that anymore. But in the beginning, I don't think they really wanted us down there. They thought it would sort of phase out. And
That it was just a fad, a novelty.
yeah, just something, we'd go down there. Well, they actually told me that I wouldn't last 2 weeks down there.
Ever been scared?
A couple times, yes.
Underground is a different world. It's a different culture. It's independent, it's high risk, it's spooky. You spend some time underground.
Darcy Martin is National Education Director for Christiansen's Union, the United Steelworkers.
On the surface, it's a different thing. You're talking about driving equipment. That is much more familiar ground.
Why is it hard to adapt? Is it simply the idea of teamwork? Everybody's life depends on everybody doing his job?
There's teamwork, there's lack of supervision. When you're underground, you can't be controlled all the time, even with the
You're your own boss.
You have to make your choices yourself and carry the responsibility that comes with it. It's a cowboy style of work.
You say you can do the job, the men say you can do the job. How do you really know for sure that you're cutting the mustard?
Well, my blast seemed to be breaking. It seems to be doing all right. I get to load as many bags as they do. And
What if you had to lift 150 pounds?
well, I figure there's a lot of men down there that can't lift 150 pounds, not just me. But there is times, like cement bags and things like that, and I can lift them, so.
You throw them around with the rest of them, do?
Well, I'll not throw them. I can lift them and put them somewhere.
Christiansen may be unique in Canada, but in mines in the United States, there are plenty of women miners. Even in backwoods Appalachia. It's coal they mine here, and most companies are forced by law to hire women. At some mines, up to 20% of all new underground workers must be female. But this is hillbilly country, solid Bible Belt. People here have strong ideas about a woman's place. Winning the right to work in these mines may not seem like much of a victory. They're dangerous. Inside, cave-ins, coal dust, methane gas. And there's resentment. There are few enough jobs for men in rural West Virginia, and most resent sharing them. But for single women, often with families to support, riding into the darkness is the only alternative to minimum wage, sewing hip pockets onto blue jeans at the nearby garment factory. At the Harris Drift Mine, 7 women work alongside 800 men, 3 miles under the mountain.
Hey, Jimmy, I did that one. I did that one, big boy. There you go.
The women have been here for 10 years. Dorothy Keene, a 51-year-old grandmother, was the first to be hired at Harris.
My family didn't know what to think. They were all scared about me going in there, really, because there'd been no women in there and they knew the sentiments of the coal miners. My 2 daughters, they were a little bit leery about it, but they like it now. And my grandkids are just ecstatic, really. They think it's nothing like having a grandma that works in a coal mine.
Convincing her family was one thing, the other miners another.
They put me through pure hell for 6 months. They kept me in every water hole they could find, every dirty job they could find. They wouldn't include me in anything. They didn't even want me sitting in a dinner hole with them. But they got out of that because I wouldn't leave. One of the main superstitions is women in the mines. They're afraid there's going to be a disaster. It's just one of the old superstitions that's been there since mines ever started. That's always been their belief.
Lousy jobs they could handle, but there was harassment too, sexual harassment. Judy Cobb, 24 and single, runs the machine that tears at the coal face.
When I first went to mines, I was scared.
you're going to get proposition that's only normal. It's in every business there is. My first boss he was a Christian man. He was a preacher. And he said, Judy, these men, they cuss and carry on. They always have, you know, they're not going to change because of you, which I don't feel that's right. They did it a long time before I was there. I don't want them to change just because I was there. I can block them out.
Harris hasn't been so bad. But in other mines, a rape charge, peepholes drilled into women's shower rooms, all kinds of court cases over harassment.
The mines is where the money is. And why work someplace for 8 or 10 hours a day? They do around here for what I'm making one day. 90 cents, $1.10 or whatever it is, whatever minimum wages, that's all I ever get around here. And I make something like $80, $90 a day.
And for Dorothy Keene, that's what women's rights are all about. Good pay, the biggest trailer on the lot, and weekends off. By Appalachian standards, this is suburban luxury.
Put in my 8 hours and come home, and then I still got my weekends, other than the weekends we work. I still got Saturday nights and all day Sundays. And most of the time we're laying around having cookouts.
But the story had a very different ending for Cat Counts, Virginia's very first woman miner, something of a folk hero in these parts. There was an explosion in the McClure mine. This time it was the husband who got the call.
I went in, and no sooner got in, the telephone rang. Said she was trapped.
The first woman in was the first killed. Last month, in Utah, 27 miners died, one of them a woman. Back in Wawa, Ontario, there's been tragedy too. Just before Christmas, a man was killed in the Algoma mine, falling rock. It was the third death in the 4 years Mildred Christiansen has been underground, and this time right in her section. But miners keep going back, and after a night off at the club, she'll be underground again. Her two friends wish they could join her. At the beginning, these three women all went underground together. Irene Mitchell and Florence Rigoli were truck drivers in the mine. Like Christiansen, they showed they could do the job. But then came the layoffs.
In Canada, by 1982, the mining industry was in the middle of the worst recession in 50 years. 40% of the mining jobs disappeared. The total workforce across the country went from 135,000 down to 80,000. Some mines closed altogether. Here at Algoma, they laid off almost half the workforce. According to the rules, last hired was first to go. That meant the women.
Most of the women working on the surface found themselves out of a job, and all of the underground workers went except Christiansen. It's been the same story in mines all across the country, and in the United States, too. Of the 4,000 women who went underground to mine coal in America, less than half remain today. Quotas on hiring aren't of much use when there are no new jobs. The steelworker's Darcy Martin.
The women showed that they could do those jobs. The women showed that they could carry the risks, that the challenges, the difficulties, that they could develop the skills. The women can do the job. There's no question about that.
If, as in Appalachia, women in Canada have proved they can do these jobs, but they're not there today because of the economy, these kind of rights for women, are they rights at all, or are they a luxury of a growing economy?
I think that an economy that provides employment is not a luxury. I think that what's happened is we are being told much more widely that things that we consider central are in fact frills. It's not true. Women getting decent jobs is not a frill.
But how much of this is the union's fault? You're the ones insisting on layoffs by seniority, and that really dooms the women.
Seniority is a little bit like democracy. It's a lousy system, except there isn't a better one. I've lived through layoffs myself.